Have you ever heard the term the five boroughs? That refers to the five big sections of New York City, and today we're going to talk all about Brooklyn, one of the five boroughs of New York. Hi there, I'm Jeff. JR is the producer, and this is episode 235 of Plain English. Coming up today for the third in our occasional series on destinations in the English-speaking world, we're going to Brooklyn. It was once its own city, but is now part of New York City. The English expression is a quirky one, to be able to tell, like you can tell X, I can't tell Y, like that. We have a quote of the week, and our video lesson on the website for Plus subscribers is all about probabilities, talking about whether something is likely or not likely, more likely, less likely, based on probabilities, the chance that it will happen. So that, alongside all the other episode resources, is available at plainenglish.com/235. Brooklyn is a borough of New York City, one of five large sections of the city, and though less famous than the borough of Manhattan, it has transformed itself into a destination in and of itself here in the past decade. Brooklyn is just across the river from Manhattan, and the place for us to begin our audio tour is Brooklyn's driveway, the Brooklyn Bridge. The borough of Brooklyn is separated from Manhattan by the East River. Until the late 1800s, the only way to get from Brooklyn to Manhattan was by ferry. The ferries were popular and competitive, but still less convenient than a fixed bridge. The first fixed crossing was planned in 1870, but it was not until May 24th, 1883, that the New York and Brooklyn Bridge was opened to the public. At first, it accommodated horse-drawn carriages, then elevated train lines, and now pedestrian and car traffic. It's an architectural gem made of stone arches and suspension cables, and it is Brooklyn's most famous landmark. The bridge connects Lower Manhattan with Brooklyn's traditional downtown, offering sweeping views of the cityscapes on both sides of the river. JR and I walked across it on a frigid December day when he was visiting New York a few years ago. Today, Brooklyn is known for its art and literature scene, independent restaurants, coal-fired pizza, eclectic shops, and craft breweries. Brooklyn has a lot of cultural attractions. The Brooklyn Museum is the city's third largest and holds over 1.5 million artifacts from around the world. The Brooklyn Botanic Gardens, the New York Aquarium, and the New York City Transit Museum are among the other cultural attractions. The Barclays Center on Atlantic Avenue is where the Brooklyn Nets basketball and New York Islanders hockey teams play. A women's professional basketball team is scheduled to take up residence there this year. If you're willing to venture a little deeper into Brooklyn, you can visit Coney Island and Brighton Beach. Coney Island has one of the world's oldest roller coasters, the Coney Island Cyclone. It's wooden. It opened in 1927, and it reaches a maximum speed of 60 miles per hour. I have been on it. It creaks and it shakes, and you wonder how it's still operating, and you pray for dear life. But it is safe and a fun way to experience roller coasters as they once were. The good news is it's accessible. You don't need to pay for a huge theme park. Just walk up to the booth on the street, buy your ticket, and hop right on. Parents take their children on the subway out to Coney Island just to ride the roller coaster and come home. While you're out there, you should indulge in Coney Island's most famous delicacy, a Nathan's Famous hot dog. Coney Island is the home of the Nathan's Famous hot dog eating contest. Held every year on the 4th of July, its contestants compete to see how many hot dogs they can eat in just 10 minutes. The record is 74. You can have just one or two at the Nathan's Famous stand. If you like to breathe the ocean breeze, you can take a walk along the Coney Island Boardwalk. That's a 2-mile-long path along the beach with souvenir shops, food, and attractions. You can catch a Brooklyn Cyclones minor league baseball game in the summertime. There's one architectural style that's always associated with Brooklyn, and that is the brownstone. Brooklyn streets lined with brownstones are among the most scenic residential streets in New York City. The Brooklyn brownstone. It's a row house made of, brown stone and built typically in the 19th century. Besides its color, how can you tell if a house is a brownstone? Well, brownstones are typically 3 full stories above ground, plus a lower level that's partially underground. They're generally attached so that an entire block has one brownstone after another, all sharing a wall, so it looks like one huge long building down the block. Each one has a steep staircase going up a half story from the street, a stoop you can sit on and watch the world go by, and bay windows. Brownstone as a building material was cheap because it was easy to mine and sculpt, but today is considered prestigious and vintage. If you can't stay in a vintage brownstone, you could at least browse the vintage shops. There's great shopping in Brooklyn for people of any budget, from vintage resale shops to high-end designers and everything in between. On my most recent walk through Brooklyn, I remember seeing handmade blue jeans, artisanal soaps, beard care stores, and more. Speaking of beards, Brooklyn has been, of late, known as the epicenter of hipster culture. In my personal experience, Brooklyn's reputation as hipster central is overblown and not an entirely fair statement to make, since Brooklyn is about so much more than hipsters. But nonetheless, the two are often said in the same breath: Brooklyn hipsters. Hipsters are a subculture that tends to shun mainstream fashions in favor of a style that's individual, unique, and authentic. A hipster would be more likely to have a beard, wear a checked flannel shirt, wear unique designs, listen to indie music, wear bold glasses, and shop local. You would not find a hipster in a chain restaurant. You would find one in the Park Slope Food Co-op, which is a grocery store owned and operated, yes, operated by its customers. You would not find a hipster at Urban Outfitters. You would find one at a vintage resale shop. You would not find a hipster at Starbucks. You would find one at Partners Coffee. And at Partners Coffee, you would not find the hipster order the pre-made coffee. It would probably be the fresh pour-over variety. Who else lives in Brooklyn? Plenty of people. The area facing the waterfront close to Manhattan is dotted with new luxury high-rise condominiums, which start in the seven figures, meaning $1 million or more for a studio apartment. Those have stunning views of Manhattan and the New York skyline. Young families live in Park Slope. Carroll Gardens is known as an Italian neighborhood, Brighton Beach as a Russian one, though most Brooklyn neighborhoods, like so much of New York, are a mishmash of all types of people from every part of the world. Brooklyn has more people than Manhattan. If it were its own standalone city, as it was until 1898, it would be the third largest city in the United States. I want to say thank you to all of you who've taken the Plain English Listener Survey. We've gotten hundreds of responses so far. It's clear from your responses that you take your English seriously and you're working so hard. The survey is already a big help to us, but if you haven't made your voice count, then please go to plainenglish.com/survey and tell us what you think. It's just a couple of minutes, but it's a huge help to us. plainenglish.com/survey. Today's expression is to be able to tell. You can tell, I can tell. Have you heard that before? Usually tell means to talk to someone and to pass along information. Tell me your name. Tell me what time you'd like to meet for dinner. I'll tell you all about my day at the dinner table, like that. But there is another quirky way of using tell, and it has a totally different meaning. It's almost always used with the verb to be able to, or variations of can, like can, can't, could, couldn't, and it means to notice or to identify by looking at something. Here's how you heard it earlier. I was describing a brownstone, a classic style of house in Brooklyn, and a brownstone is brown, yes, but lots of houses are brown in color without being a brownstone. So how can you tell if a house is a brownstone? How do you know by looking that it's a brownstone? Well, you can tell that a building is a brownstone because it's 3 stories, has a stoop in front and bay windows, and shares a wall with the houses on either side. That's how you can tell if a building is a brownstone. That's how you can identify it. Let's say you're with your spouse at a table in a restaurant and you're waiting for another couple to join you. Far across the crowded restaurant, you see 2 people walk in. You ask your spouse, "Hey, is that our friends?" Your spouse looks closely, squints, and says, "I can't tell from here." In this case, I can't tell means I can't determine if it's true. I can't see. Maybe the distance is too great. Maybe there are too many people in the way. For one reason or another, your spouse can't say for sure if it's your friends. He or she can't tell. Now let's say dinner is over and your two friends are gone. You're with your spouse at home talking about the evening. You might say, both of them seem to have lost weight lately. You can really tell that they've been exercising. You can tell that they've been exercising means that a person would notice that they've been exercising. They appear slimmer, their clothes fit better, whatever the signals. You can tell means that a person, in general, would notice. You can really tell that this neighborhood is changing. That means it's clear to an observer that this neighborhood is changing. And it's true of where I live. When I first moved here 4 years ago, there were some cheap stores and ethnic restaurants, but nothing really premium. But now, an upscale cocktail bar, a fancy donut shop, and a fancy coffee shop by the train station have all opened in the last year. You can really tell that the neighborhood is changing. You would notice it by looking. I sometimes can't tell if my client is happy with my work or not. In this case, it's not about looking, it's just about noticing or being aware. Some people, you can clearly tell if they're happy or not. They wear their emotions on their sleeve, we sometimes say. If they're happy, you know it. If they're unhappy, well, you know that too. But not everyone is like that. With some people, it can be difficult to tell if they're happy, sad, upset, angry. They don't always show their emotions. It can be tough to tell what they're thinking or feeling. Here's a good quote for you this week by the English writer Ernest Hemingway. It is good to have an end to journey toward, but it is the journey that matters in the end. This was a long episode, so we're going to wrap things up here. Thanks for being with us, and remember that we'll be back on Thursday for another episode of Plain English. If building your English vocabulary is one of your goals for 2020, then Plain English Plus can really help you reach that goal. Each episode has a flashcard set with 5 new English words straight from the episode. You're much more likely to remember these words because you first heard them in a real context. It's not like pulling 5 words out of the dictionary. Research shows that if you have a reason to remember words, a story behind them, then you've got a better chance of remembering them. So come learn 10 new words with us every week at Plain English Plus by coming to plainenglish.com/plus, plainenglish.com/plus.